just kind of a common misconception that's
Sure.
been widely accepted as truth, is that when you go into meditation, you completely clear your mind. Now, don't get me wrong, monks on the mountaintop who dedicate their lives, to doing this as like their sole purpose in life, to like help heal the world through the collective consciousness and meditation and the next level that they are. Yeah, those guys can clear their mind.
Of course. Yeah,
You
certainly.
and I like hustling on a daily basis and just trying to like continually bring ourselves back to equilibrium. It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Let's link up with Krista on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 40 of The FYX. As always, I am your host, Krista Huber, and I am so excited to bring you today's podcast conversation with an all-around badass female, my new friend and brand new author of an incredible book all about Kundalini Yoga. That is Erin Downing. Erin and I sat down for nearly 2 hours. I don't have the official timestamp on this episode because I'm recording this and then we'll put it into post-production, but I'm excited to see where it turns up. We cover just about anything you could possibly think of when it comes to meditation, the mind, hormones, how Erin got herself on this journey of exploring different types of yoga, and really just understanding what meditation actually means. As you guys will hear throughout this conversation, we hit this point right out of the gate, and it's something that I want to emphasize because Erin's really made me think about it a lot myself, and it's definitely a mindset that I've had before and something I've struggled with when it comes to meditation. The goal of meditation is not necessarily to completely clear your mind. In fact, it's to actually acknowledge thoughts as they come up. Erin does such a thorough job of describing exactly why that is, talking about our subconscious and our programming and how we're wired based on all these shoulds and coulds that you guys know that I love to reference when it comes to things like nutrition and dieting and our fitness. We go pretty deep on her journey that led her to decide to just quit her job, pick up, leave a toxic work environment, and explore the thing that's allowed her to figure out how to cope with everyday life and have better coping mechanisms for showing up as her best self. We talk about how that energy and aura that she's been able to cultivate through her Kundalini practice was noticeable by other people and something that they wanted to jump into. So I strongly urge you, as I do throughout the recorded conversation, to check out Erin's book. It's amazing. It's not the type of book that is intended or has to be read cover to cover. And you learn about a lot of different interesting things related to the world of yoga. Everything from why do we actually even use a yoga mat in our practice to what Kundalini is, different types of exercises that you can try, and so much more. If you are particularly interested, and I would suggest doing this before diving into the episode to kind of set our tone and focus for the conversation and our energy as we recorded this podcast last week, Erin and I actually did a really cool 2-minute brief meditation, and she was kind enough to do it with me via Instagram Live. So I would love for you guys to go ahead and check it out. Jump over to my Instagram page at the Krista Huber. I've got it linked down for you in the show notes like we always do, and take a look at it. We did a really, really cool meditation that isn't something I've been used to before, and it really just kind of helped me like let out some energy and kind of reset my space. I had been rushing right into the podcast recording after a busy morning, and I kind of felt a little bit distracted. So I was so glad that she suggested to do that. It's called Fists of Anger. Go check it out, try it. It's something you can do in the privacy of your own space. As she kind of walked me through it, she said, close your eyes, nobody's watching you. This is all about you, and just let it ride. So really excited to welcome Erin to the FYX stage and hope you guys enjoy this conversation. Please, as always, if you do like it, let us know. Reach out to me, reach out to Erin. Go ahead and pre-order her book. You can do it on Amazon. Check out her website. We've got all of that linked down in the show notes. So go ahead, jump on over to my Instagram page, check out my last IGTV live video, and try out the meditation for yourself. See what you think. It's something new. It's something different. Maybe you'll find something for you, just as Erin had really wanted to explore the world of meditation and yoga, but didn't really know exactly how to get into it, or would try to start and then stop and then have it be met with frustration, until all of a sudden this practice really changed her outlook on it. Erin, welcome to the FYX podcast. We are so excited to have you today. Been a long time coming trying to make this conversation happen, and I can't wait to talk all about your book. But before we get into everything, we first want to know about you. First question, classic question that we like to open up the show with is, who is Erin Downing? And more specifically, why should we care about what she has to say?
Oh gosh. So who is Erin Downing? She is a multifaceted being who likes all sorts of things, is equal parts city girl, equal parts beach, equal parts mountains, hippie woo-woo, and business executive, right? You name it. And I really kind of dip my toe into the polarity, which is why this practice and my spiritual practice in general is so important, because it helps me keep balance. And to be honest, it helps me get through this crazy life that we all choose to live in a way that feels really authentic. And besides, helps me bring me back home to myself, helps me be my most confident and authentic person with all of the warts and scrapes and bruises and dark nights of the soul, and really just continually come back to myself. And it's through that I'm able to do, what I do on a daily basis. And I'm able to share that with the world, which is why I'm here, which is why I wrote the book and literally turned my life upside down and lived off savings and did all kinds of crazy stuff to do it, because it was that important. I really wanted to be able to bring this medicine to other people. And it's part of my life's work and part of my passion and part of something that really fills up my soul.
Beautiful. So much to unpack there. But before we get into the details, fun question that I open up every episode with is, I'm a big coffee drinker, as I shared with you. I love my coffee. I take my coffee cup very seriously. So I just like to know, to kind of connect my guest of the week with the rest of the audience and me personally, what do you like to sip on in the morning? What's a part of your morning routine when it comes to your caffeine?
So my current obsession, legitimately, I went and got one this morning. Since I moved to LA, there's something here that we did not have anywhere else that I've lived, even in New York. It's called a Chagiago. And
I have no idea what that is.
They take activated. It's to die for. They take activated mushrooms.
Okay.
And legitimately have that and all sorts of other adaptogens and stuff that are just good for your whole body. And there's a place right around the corner from where I live that not only does that, but they use monk fruit sweetener. So It's this delicious thing that's 40 calories and good for your body and gives you your caffeine fix without all the jitters. And it's just to die for.
Well, I'm jealous, because I would love to check that out. And it sounds like I can't get that over here on the East Coast. I actually recently, because I love caffeine so much, and it's not necessarily the best for your nervous system and your adrenals all the time. It has its time and place, but I've definitely been the person to overdo it a little bit on coffee. So I recently started experimenting with this really, really cool mix of instant coffee and mushroom spore powder. And it's awesome. And it has exactly what you're describing, adaptogen properties. It's called Organo. If anybody wants to try it out, hit me up in the DMs. I'll send you some sample packets. It's really, really good. And as somebody who loves her coffee so much, I've always struggled to kind of find that replacement that didn't honestly just taste really something watered down, that couldn't do it for me. This, because it has a little bit of instant coffee, you wouldn't know the difference. So I'm super excited about that.
I'm in it.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, let's get right into it. Where do you want to start? I think obviously this conversation is grounded in the book in terms of timeliness, but I think it would be really important, just in talking to you one-on-one, reviewing some material on your website and everything, to kind of walk us through how you found Kundalini, because I feel like even in reading the foreword of the book, and I love the way you set it up, by the way, to really kind of help guide the reader on what they can expect from the experience, but also, hey, have no expectations at the same time, right? Is how you found this. And then we can kind of get into some of maybe the misconceptions around it. And I think that is what kind of ultimately prompted you to take this in the direction that you have in putting this work together beyond your coaching and your own daily practice of it.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, how I found Kundalini, yoga came into my life in general, like what we would traditionally think of as like, when you think of yoga in the West, right? And I was living in San Diego at the time, and I was starting to really get into the weeds of my marriage completely dissolving. And my best friend from college that actually was living in New York City at the time literally bought me like a 10 pack for a local yoga studio and was like, this changed my life, start here. And I just was like, I'll do anything. Like, yes, ma'am, sure. I will be there tomorrow. So my traditional yoga journey started back then, probably like in my early 20s. Now it's really cool that people have like yoga in college, but like at Virginia Tech, you couldn't take like a yoga elective. And if you did, I didn't know about it. I was too busy like drinking and doing things that I probably shouldn't have been doing. But when I went to New York City, when I went to New York City, it was partially because I always felt my soul called there, but also when that marriage was dissolving, I kind of decided like, okay, if I get a job that's going to push me forward in my career and all these great decisions, like God, universe, whomever. My mom had passed away already at that point, so mom, talking to whoever would listen, right? Yeah. I ended up moving to New York, and I got a good job, and I was on my own for the first time. My ex-husband and I met 2 weeks after my 21st birthday.
Okay.
So I learned how to be, and I was still in college at the time, right? So I learned how to be an adult with him. So going to New York, I didn't even know how to set up a Netflix account. Like that's how beta it was. Like I had a routine. I had become a fully functioning working human being outside of college, outside of my hometown, outside any comfort, with this other partner, with this second person.
Right.
So when I went to New York being New York as it is, I had a crazy stressful job, like up and down the city all the time. For the first time, I was like, oh, wait, I have to take my clothes to wash and fold. Like to get groceries takes like a 45-minute like journey, plus the hour and a half you wait in the Trader Joe's line.
Yeah, shopping while you're in line. Little pro tip.
Yeah, seriously, pro tip. Exactly. Yeah. Like, there were so many things, and I was just like anywhere and everywhere. It was the time when everyone was talking about meditation. Meditation is the secret sauce to life. And I was like, how in the world am I supposed to get everything that's going on up here to stop? Because that was the verbiage, right? The verbiage was like, oh, you quiet your mind and that's how you meditate. And first and foremost, not true. Like that is not the goal of meditation. The goal of meditation is not to quote unquote get silent and just like gaze internally into the void of space, kind of, which seems like so scary and unrealistic, especially in today's day and age. And I couldn't figure it out. Like for 5 years running, I was like, I'm going to make my New Year's resolution every year. I'm going to learn how to meditate. I'm going to make a daily meditation practice, and it's going to happen. It didn't happen. Like it didn't even come close to happening. If anything, I would just get so frustrated. And then if anything, it became worse because it was that negative self-talk, right?
Sure.
That like, why can't you do
You're
this?
Convinced you couldn't do it.
Like, forget it. And they're like, and then all of our demons come up because they're like, what's wrong with you? Why have other people can't do this? Like, what's the big deal? So long story short, how I discovered Kundalini is I was sitting at my desk, like literally views of Grand Central out my window, stressed out, 80-hour work weeks, trying to like figure out this meditation thing, couldn't figure it out. It was no such thing as parasympathetic, like in my body. I was flight or fright, like at all times. And I got a random email into my inbox. I have no idea how it got there, besides what I now believe is pure divine intervention, right? I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the Rubin Museum, but it's this amazing to die for museum, I believe on 17th Street, kind of closer to Chelsea. It's got all of these spiritual modalities, religious modalities within it. And they have a space when you go down in the bottom that's kind of like an event auditorium space. And they were having an event that was a meditation series. And I was like, I have no idea what this is. I literally sent the email to my girlfriend whose cubicle was like around the corner and said, you're coming with me. I don't know what this is, but we're going tonight. She's like, okay. So, like fall, cold New York City day, like walking down the streets of Chelsea, you know, trying to like, no idea what I'm about to walk into. And what it was there's this docu-series called On Meditation, like ON Meditation. And it's like many documentary series by people who just have serious meditation practices.
Okay.
And one of the people who was in the series was being shown that night. And without getting too far into the whole thing, because we did watch part of it, but the individual who was on part of that meditation, as we got into the room, grounded us into the room with a Kundalini meditation. So kind of like what we just did on Instagram Live without all of the backstory of how to do it. She kind of just like told us, and before I knew it, all of us had our arms in the air. And we're doing this crazy breath of fire, like what we were doing. And right after that, 2-3 minute meditation, I literally looked at my girlfriend and was like, oh my God, I just meditated. Like, what is this magic and how do I get more of it? And that individual, who most people know now, because this was like before her pre-Over Soul Sunday days.
I love this detail.
Yeah, it's Gabby Bernstein. I had no idea who she was. And she was still like relatively unknown. Now, let's be honest. I would happy to be the relatively unknown that Gabby Bernstein was at that time at any time in my life, because she's so like next level at this point. But I mean, it was before, like I said, Super Soul Sunday or before any of that. And she was there. And I mean, I got to meet her and I just was like, done. Like I figured it out. I figured out how to meditate. Like, sign me up. Let's do it. And that's really what began my journey to Kundalini meditation and began the practice that really transformed my entire life.
That's amazing. And before we talk about more of the yoga and the Kundalini piece and meditating and everything, by the way, I didn't realize that you went to Virginia Tech. We were school neighbors. I went to Washington and Lee. So I was a little further north, like not even an hour away in Lexington. So I love that we have that in common. So let's talk about, just in case anybody didn't check out our Instagram Live, and they are like, what is Kundalini? How is it a different type of meditation? Because I think this detail is really important. I want to go there first, and then I'm going to say this so I don't forget the follow-up question, but I'll repeat it. I want to talk about what you said initially, this idea that it is not true that you need to have a totally clear mind in terms of understanding meditation. And I think that'll set us up really well for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah. So how Kundalini is different is Kundalini is what you would describe as more like a meditative practice. It's more spiritual. It's more hippie woo woo. It's why a lot of people are like, what the heck is this? Like, your arms are flailing in the air. You're doing some crazy breath work. Like there's some chanting and mantras, and people are like, no, thanks, pass. But seriously, it will change your life, and it is worth giving it a shot. Kundalini. So in the Instagram Live, I taught you Fists of Anger. This is legitimately one of my favorite meditations of all time. 3 minutes. Like I alluded to, like as a woman raised in the South, I don't think I've ever heard anyone on my mom's side of the family raise their voice ever. I don't think I've ever seen any of them get into an argument. Like, I personally, from my culture, upbringing, and background, at least in my own personal family dynamic, was never taught how to express that end of the emotional spectrum in any way, be it journaling, be it like doing whatever. I was really into sports and stuff, and still really am. And as we could talk about sun, moon, and rising, all astrology, but I have a Pisces moon, and with that Pisces moon, it's a lot of water sign. It's really fluid. It's a really kind of a mutable sign, and it's also kind of very like a mystical sign kind of way. Like, if I'm on the Peloton, I will get downloads like from spirit or something that I haven't been able to figure out how to do or whatever. We're like, when I'm in that workout, when I'm moving, when I'm sweating, when I'm out of my head, when I'm moving energy physically through my body, it helps me process my emotions. Now, yes, there are all the added benefits of, exercise too, but like my main reason why I move my body is for my mental and just like lung capacity and that sort of aspect of things. And Kundalini is literally like the spiritual yogic, whatever, counterpart to that.
Great way to describe it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, so in the meditation that we did today, we're moving our arms, right? So you're doing some physical movement and you're
Mm-hmm.
moving your arms while also doing breath work, while also kind of rolling your eyes back, gazing towards your third eye, and while also calling up all of these like anger and emotions. So you're like quick hitting it from every single one of the ways that you can. You're not just like running and listening to a podcast, right? Like you might be doing right now, or you're not just, like doing some yoga flow, like kind of gazing at the person next to you, wondering if you're doing it right or they're doing something differently. Like you're really tapping into every single one of your senses internally while you're moving your arms, while you're moving your energy, while you're moving your breath, all at the same time. So that's why it's such a quick hit method to get into a meditative state, like lickety split, because you're using every single tool in your tool belt at one time.
That makes a ton of sense. And obviously, I just experienced it, so I can attest to everything you're saying. And, I think it's really, really important to highlight this concept that there's a misconception around meditation that the goal is blank slate, clear your mind, clear your mind. And of course, we talked about it even when you kind of set us up, that we're creating this blank space and like resetting the energy in the room. But that doesn't mean that everything that's going on up here, and for anybody listening, I'm pointing to my head, is I always forget that not everyone's watching the video. Is not about necessarily clearing. And one way that it was described to me years ago, and it's come up for me a lot in the past year because I've gotten way more into yoga just in general.
Yeah.
And it was a yoga instructor that I had. I grew up a swimmer, and whenever she took us through a shavasana, it was just like a typical vinyasa flow style class. But whenever she took us through the shavasana at the end, and for anybody who's never taken yoga, that's the one that probably is opposed. Most people know you're laying on the ground at the end. It's like a way to finish your practice. And yep. And she always said to us, like, if you have a thought, she would use this like physical representation of it. And I really like this idea. Take the thought, grab it, like acknowledge that it's there, and then throw it away. So rather than thinking that you can't have a thought, if one does come up, and she would always say to us, it's going to come up, so I'm telling you this because I know it will happen, just acknowledge that you're thinking and then move on from it. And I feel like that can definitely tie into your perspective on it. So I'd love for you to just talk about that more.
Yeah. So one of the things I think that's one of the biggest hiccups that is misinformation, so to speak, right? It's not malicious misinformation.
No.
By any means. It's just kind of a common misconception that's been widely accepted as truth, is that when you go into meditation, you completely clear your mind. Now, don't get me wrong, monks on the mountaintop who dedicate their lives, to doing this as like their sole purpose in life to like help heal the world through the collective consciousness and meditation and the next level that they are. Yeah, those guys can clear their mind.
Of course. Yeah,
You
certainly.
and I like hustling on a daily basis and just trying to like continually bring ourselves back to equilibrium. It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And most people say, oh, but I close my eyes in meditation and all these thoughts and things. And my thought process on that, and what I would tell, especially when I was taking clients more regularly, is like, the thing that you don't understand is those thoughts are running in the background at all times.
Okay.
Our life is run 90% by our subconscious thoughts. What we think actively is about 10% of what we can acknowledge. And when we start to get into that meditative state, and this is like the neuroscience behind why meditation is so important, is truly, truly, truly that 90% of what we do on a daily basis is subconscious. It's programming, it's our backgrounds, it's our upbringing, it's our societal, norms and all of the jazz that we take in from, in utero on, right? And what meditation does is it all of a sudden takes the subconscious and brings the subconscious to the conscious, right? That veil, people talk a lot about the veil and, kind of like more of a hippie woo-woo turn, talking about like, the worldly plane and the spiritual plane, but like we have a veil also internally between our subconscious and our conscious. And when you go into that meditative state, you're bringing that subconscious no longer in the shadow to the forward. So if you imagine, I'm 38, almost 39 years old. If I've never meditated before in my life, I've got 38, almost 39 years of inner dialogue that's like, oh my God, she can hear me. Like, woo! Like, hey, over here. And don't forget about this thing. And like, oh, remember when you're 5 and and all of a sudden you're just like hit like a tsunami tidal wave with all of these thoughts and emotions and feelings that have been kept under the surface that are like, oh my God, she can hear me. Like, yes, like, no, my turn, my turn, my turn, my turn. And so like, the trick is not to like, the trick is number one, don't have judgment on it. Like every set of circumstances for each individual is completely different. And it doesn't even matter if you and I went to the same school, grew up across the street from the same and same typical upbringing. Like we're going to have different parts of ourselves that are completely different ends of the spectrum. So first off, no judgment. But second, think about it this way. It's like, if you don't address it, those voices are just going to be yelling in the background anyway. So we might as well muster that inner courage to come face to face with it and look at our mental health just like we would our physical health. If, like I had COVID, right? Like I am purposely doing things now to strengthen my lung capacity, right? I'm doing more breath work. I'm doing that sort of thing to say like, okay, how can I make sure that my lungs heal properly from this? And I actively put intention to that. The same thing is with your meditative Kundalini, however you get there, practice. It's like, how can I put pinpointed attention to the fact that like all of this stuff is going on the surface, and I don't want things that maybe aren't true anymore, maybe coping mechanisms that worked at one point that maybe don't serve me anymore. I don't want those things running the show. I'm going to show up as my most empowered self, my most authentic self, and the best version of myself today. And you start to find the courage to look at them. And I always tell people, just kind of watch it like you're watching a movie. No attachment to it. But I mean, you can take a thought and throw it out like you were saying. Maybe I just have way more thoughts, who knows? But like, they don't just like come in things, they come like a movie reel. And I just kind of watch them and let them go in front of me. Like, okay, great. Didn't realize that was still bugging me. Like, okay, noted. Like, got it. I should probably journal about that later. Like, oh, yep. Wow. I didn't even know that thing that somebody said to me last week is still bothering me, or like even bothered me in the first place. Like, okay, noted. Like something else I need to come face to face with and address. And again, just know like every single person on this planet, regardless of where you come from, how you identify, is going to close their eyes for the first time and get in a meditated state and be hit with that tsunami tidal wave. So first and foremost, like give yourself some grace around the fact that you are exactly where you need to be. And that is so normal. And you have just started the process of healing your inner child and healing your wounds and healing the shadow sides of yourself. And you actually just gave yourself the biggest gift by letting all of those voices finally be heard.
You mentioned coping mechanisms, and I'd love to know, in your journey as you've explored Kundalini and really dedicated yourself to the practice, if you wouldn't mind talking about what you've now been able to reflect on as maybe the not so best coping mechanism that you've had in the past, and how the work that you now do on a regular basis has replaced that, and what that looks like for you, how that shows up in the rest of your life.
Sure. It's a journey first and foremost, and it never gets easier. I'm just going to point blank say that you just kind of start to build a resilience, and you start to be able to find ways to bring yourself back home to yourself on a regular basis. And there's a lot of things that we do to numb. I've never been even like, I was never somebody who was like into drugs or any of these things. So like, I was never like an alcoholic. Yes, I drank too much in college for sure, but I went to Virginia Tech and Frank Beamer was coach and we went to the national championship. So that's my excuse. But like there's sneaky things that happen. And I think the first time, actually, speaking of New York, there's this amazing book. So when I went from New York City to Charlotte, which is how we got connected through our mutual friend in Charlotte, I was going through the most tumultuous breakup of my life. And I was like reading all sorts. I wrote a book, so obviously I really like to read, right?
Yeah.
Like I love books. I love highlighting other authors. I love giving recommendations. And there's a book, I believe it's called Love Hurts, by an individual who actually has a meditation studio based in the Village in New York City.
Oh, cool.
He's happy to share. It's a really great book. And he talks about coping mechanisms, but he talks about like numbing. And I never really realized all of the random numbing techniques I picked up. And one of the things that I'm actively working at this point in my life, having been on this deep, deep journey for easily 15 years, right? Like it is work. The thing that I'm working on the most at the moment is being able to sit in the discomfort and sit in the pain and not numb it out. Because only through feeling it, the only way out is through, right? Only through feeling it doesn't move. And it hurts like hell. And it's frustrating and it's heartbreaking and it's whatever. And no matter how many tools I have in my toolkit, there's still things that sometimes it's just too much. Even it's like when he said in this book, I never realized like, oh, wait, yeah, Netflix is a numbing technique, right? Overeating,
Scrolling your phone. Yeah.
scrolling your phone, the blue light. So even just tidbits like that. So like I personally am a very, very sensitive individual. And this is one of the reasons why I don't live in New York City anymore, is because once I finally figured out that I was incredibly empathetic and surrounded by all of that energy all the time, I did not have the tools to protect myself from not feeling everything that everyone was feeling around me. And
Wow, that's really interesting.
yeah, I couldn't get my footing. Like the first time I realized I was empathetic, speaking of this was before I was deep into this meditation. And this was the time when I was trying to figure out meditation and everything. I think I had come off of like a 90-hour work week. I was on a subway coming home to my place in the Upper West at the time. And all of a sudden, it's like I had this out of body experience where I looked over and I was like, oh my gosh, like I could feel that somebody was crying. And I was like, somebody's crying right now. And I like lifted my head up and I could feel it. I was like, oh my gosh, that person is going through immense grief. That person's going through a breakup. Like that person's like basically having a panic attack. That person's angry as hell. Right. And I literally was just like overhit in the subway by it's like I could almost like see auras or something. I could see every single person's like emotion, feel it, whatever. And I was like, holy crap, like I can't even breathe. I felt everything in my body from all these other individuals. And I was just like, what is happening? And whatever defense mechanisms that I had built up to create that wall, to create that shell, were from an unhealthy place, because I was just so overwhelmed by emotions, thoughts, feelings, what was happening to me internally, and being an empathetic person, that I just like built up walls. And when I was so fatigued, so tired, so burnt out, all of those walls, they finally came down. I didn't have any healthy boundaries to experience somebody's emotions and then gently give them right back to them. Right.
Yeah. And it makes a lot of sense with what you led with, this idea of seeing your emotions all the way through and tying that into burnout, because obviously burnout's become a hot topic. I was interestingly listening to a podcast the other day, and I can't remember, it was a Lewis Howes podcast, and I can't remember who he was interviewing, but this person was talking about the fact that burnout is not a new thing. It's just gotten a lot more attention in the past year because it's being felt on a wider scale. And there is a lot of research around this, multiple books on the topic. And one of them in particular talks about the fact that, and it was in the context of females especially, that a lot of the time, because of the way we're wired, we tend to not experience emotions all the way through, and really trying to understand, of almost looking at them like a tunnel. And you have to get to the other side of the tunnel in order to relieve yourself from that feeling of burnout, as an example. It could be any of those feelings that you were just describing, but what you shared about that made me think of that. And I think that's so true. And I think that's really hard for people, regardless, male, female, whatever. I think that's just hard for people in general. And it goes back to exactly what you said about your childhood, right? In societal pressure or whatever, that these rules that we think we have to do this thing, we have to do that thing. I don't know if I shared this with you when we first spoke, but I broke off an engagement last year, and a lot of going through the process of doing that, so much of my feelings that I had were simply because I was so convinced that other people would perceive me as a certain way, and that didn't fit with where I should be or what I should have done or whatever it was by this age, this time. And I needed to just process that and sit with that for a little bit in order to get through it and be like, you know what, I do care about this, but I don't want to care about it. And I was always operating from this place of like, I don't care what people think. I don't care what people think. And it's more so, I think when you say that a lot, you kind of deep down really do.
100%. So there's two things I want to touch on that. First
Yeah.
off, best piece of advice, one of the best, there's like a handful, like less than 5 pieces of advice that I can count in my life that have just like, I think about still to this day really regularly. And I was actually in New York getting Reiki attuned. So I have like my Reiki 1 and 2 men. And
Cool.
the woman who was doing that, she was like, you can't, she used it in the context of relationships. So this is why I keep thinking about this, right? But she was saying, you can't, if you make decisions based on the outcome that you want to achieve from other people, anything that you ever do hoping to get a certain reaction out of somebody else is never going to end up the way that you thought. And I think about this a lot, and here's my like extrapolated interpretation and years of mulling this over. But essentially, think about it this way. If you break up with somebody and you do it in the like, it's not you, it's me, or you try to be really kind and you don't really speak their truth because like you're hoping to manage the situation because it's hurtful and it's painful and you don't want to hurt the other person or any of these things, they might react the way that you hope that they would, that makes the situation a little bit easier, or they might flip their F, right? Like they could go batshit crazy on you, right? And you may not have spoken your truth and you may not have stood in your power purely because you were doing it from a heart-centered space of trying to manage somebody else's emotions and their expectations. Or you could actually speak your truth, hoping, of course, in a kind and compassionate way. Like this is please don't anybody misconstrue this as a way to be a total jerk and
say whatever you want.
No, it's like there's a way to speak your truth that's like, actually, this doesn't align with me anymore. And I can't put my finger on it, but my heart's not in the space or whatever the emotions and feelings are. And when you come from a place of honesty and you come from a place of truth, and when you come from a place of power, regardless of how the other person reacts, you will be able to continue to move through that tunnel. If you show up in that moment brushing over it and rolling over it because you're worried about what other people are going to think, or you're worried about how that reaction is going to be, or you're going to worry about any of these other things, like it's number one, never going to end up the way you are, because we have no idea about anybody's background, anybody's programming, anything that's going on, anybody's heart, mind, soul, right? So something that may not trigger you may completely trigger somebody else. So anytime we make any sort of statement, decision, anything trying to manage somebody else's emotions or the outcome of somebody else's emotions, it's never going to work. And all we end up doing is separating parts of our soul from ourselves, because we're showing up disingenuine and we're not allowing ourselves to heal through the process. Because any form, there's a grief that comes with ending an engagement. This is a future that you thought that you were going to have. This was the person you were building a life with, and everything else that comes with that. Like, it is a grieving process, regardless if you were the person to do it or the other one.
Absolutely. Totally. And I that was such a piece of it that I couldn't figure out, like, how to make sense of, right? And just needed time to go through with that. And that always has come up for me, even now later in talking about it, in how other people respond to you. Because sometimes I'll get, not sometimes, a lot, I'll get the, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, there's nothing to be sorry about. Like, it was the right thing for what I needed to do. And ultimately probably for that person as well, because we both can move on and lead our lives in the way that we wanted to. And that wasn't exactly the same, and that's okay. So it's, I think that's amazing advice, and it's a really interesting way of looking at it. And I like how you kind of framed that up for us in your interpretation of it. So thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah. And just honor you for being so vulnerable about that, because, as somebody who left a marriage myself, like when I left and moved to New York, people would say to me all the time, they're like, wow, you talk so great about your ex-husband. I'm like, I wouldn't have, first off, I wouldn't have married him if he wasn't an amazing human. He was the right human at that point in time. He's just not my forever person. And you know what? I wish him love and happiness and whatever he wants out of this world. But like, our paths were on the same path for a certain point of time.
Totally.
And then there was a time when they weren't anymore. And I fought tooth and nail for it, until I was 197%, sure that there was nothing about this that could be saved and that our trajectories are going different ways. And I left wishing him peace and blessings and all the love that he could ever want in this lifetime. And then I stepped, out of that into a really long grieving process, to be fair. Grieving the life that I thought that I was going to have with them, the children I thought I was going to have, that experience. And people there's so many, especially in this past year, there's so much unspoken grief, right? And grief is not just about somebody actually leaving this physical plane. Like there's friendships that have fallen away. There's a grief with that. There's jobs, there's relationships, there's financial security, there's the collective energy of the world. Like there's so much actual grief happening that hasn't been discussed, or people haven't been given permission to discuss, like as a society. And those reactions that you're experiencing, people saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry," that's kind of proof of that. They mean best, right? Best,
totally.
Like they're trying to say the right thing. But there is no right thing in the moment, and you did what was right for you, and you're stood in your truth and your power. And regardless of how anybody reacts, like you are now a beacon of light and an inspiration and an expander, and someone that people can now look to and say like, "Oh, wow, like what a beautiful expression of self-love."
I appreciate you acknowledging all of that. And I totally align with everything you said about your perspective in leaving a relationship too, and having it happens, and having no hard feelings towards that other person. They weren't a bad person. Like you chose to spend some portion of your life with them. Right. So I think that's a really, really significant component of it to acknowledge that. I think sometimes unless you go through an experience like that, I just don't think that people can understand. And unfortunately, a lot of the times you always hear about like really dramatic situations or something awful between those two people did happen. But to kind of steer this in the direction specifically to what made you want to leave your job, travel for a long time, write this book, and just kind of like explore this experience of Kundalini to the fullest degree that you possibly could. How did you get there? So to take us back to you describing that very first experience, I think you shared with me at one point that you then started going to classes regularly that were focused on this type of practice. But what kind of changed for you in moving multiple times and then finally being like, you know what, I'm going to drop everything and just go and I'm going to write this book?
I mean, it's been a long journey. I mean, to get, it ties perfectly, to be honest, on what we were just talking about, because, I
didn't even tee that up. It just happened. Love when that happens.
We're in alignment. So when, like I alluded to, when I left my marriage, it wasn't until it was at a point that like, I knew that like literally my soul could not go on that anymore, and I was going someplace else. The same kind of thing happened, and I completely hit rock bottom. I had been through so many dark nights of the soul. It's unreal. Like, I don't know why this is my path in life, that I've got to go through so many highs and so many lows. I guess this is why I have all of these tools that I can now like help teach other people. Because
absolutely.
At least I can acknowledge when it's happening. Now I'm like, okay, here we go again. But I started going to classes regularly. It was still really difficult to find. There was like one teacher on Sunday that I found across town with the city. But I started to just like, I'm a learner. I'm a Sagittarius. Like I love traveling. I love experiencing other cultures. I'm constantly learning, constantly reading. I love having conversations with people, different perspectives. Like it's just part of who I am. It fuels my soul. And I remember I would stay after class with this spiritual teacher, who was teaching this one Kundalini class. And I was having the duality, the polarity of what we were talking about. And this is so important to talk about Kundalini for, because this is a different part of the practice that I really resonates with me. And I feel like will really resonate with a lot of people, is that, a lot of us, speaking of burnout culture, get to the point where we just push ourselves to the edge and we're like, I can't fucking take it anymore. I'm out. And we either like crash and get sick. Like, hello, like I got COVID and stuff as soon as I moved to LA because of this. I've had COVID twice now, for the record. But like, it's like my body hit another limit where I like pushed myself further than I could. My body was like, nope, signed, sealed, delivered. We're out for a couple of weeks, right? And this happened to me like every exam I ever took in college. I would be like on like bedridden for the next week or two after it was over. You know, my adrenaline would finally like stop going. I'd have solved all the tasks that I needed to task, and my body was like, again, I'm out, need a break, and I would get sick every single time. So her and I conversations, you know, I always had this pull where it was like, okay, I'm working this corporate job. I'm an executive. I'm making money for other people. Everybody's like stressed. I would get texts from like clients at like 2 a.m. I finally, pro tip, by the way, do not disturb from 10 p.m. to at least 7 a.m.
Yep. Mine starts at 9:30. It sends me the little reminder and it's great.
100%, like, and put anybody, family, friends, that like, if any emergency happens, like in your favorites, your favorite will ring regardless. So you're not going to miss any, heaven forbid, emergency, and put up that energetic boundary. Like legitimately right now, go to your phone and put the do not disturb from 9:30 or 10 or whatever.
I even have it on right now during this on my computer and my phone.
I'm telling you, like you've got to set up boundaries to give yourself time for rest and recuperation. And those constant, we live in an age where people can get a hold of us through like 97 mediums. So giving yourself even that energetic boundary of like, look, from this time to this time is time for my body to recharge, will make the biggest difference. Even if you never do a Kundalini meditation in your life, like setting
to that.
Yeah. Set up that boundary right now. Like step number one in your healing process. But basically I was working for this one client that it became really, really toxic. And, you know, at that point I had even left New York City and was living in Charlotte. So I joke that a lot of times people quit their jobs and move to Bali. Like I kept my New York City job and just moved to Charlotte. So I was still on conference calls all day. I was still dealing with, you know, the same chaos. I was on planes, trains, and automobiles all the time, like flying all over the country, going to job sites and stuff, and meeting with clients, and still living that life. I just had a little bit easier access to the Charlotte airport. You know,
there you go. Yep. I was gonna say it's a very commutable place. So
yeah. So like I set myself up for success in that regard, that like I walked out of my house and there were trees and you know, no people honking on the streets, and I could get to the airport pretty quickly.
I always love that about Charlotte. Just like as a sidebar, the thing that I always tell people, me being from New Jersey and I lived in New York for a little bit as well, but trying to explain it to people from this area, always be like, it's really cool because you can go a mile and you're still technically like in the major part of the city, but it's like being in a New Jersey suburb at the same time. So that juxtaposition for sure.
Totally. So I had moved, and the relationship with this work environment was so toxic, to the point that even having been on this journey for 10 plus years at that point, right? Like having had my tools in my toolkit, having my physical practice, my emotional practice, my spiritual practice, you know, like having been to therapy for like, I don't know, like 10 plus years. Also at that point, like everything that I was doing to intentionally set myself up for success, I was at my limit. It was so toxic. I was crying every day. It was just a really, really bad environment. And I kept wanting to leave. And then, oh, but how am I going to do this? And I wasn't standing in my power. I was so beaten down. I was so done. And, you know, I literally got pushed off an energetic cliff. And, you know, I believe I was technically 36 at the time. And I've always wanted to get married again and have a family. And I was like, it was like something bigger than me. Like, I actually don't think I've ever told this story, but I'll tell you this. So, I had always known that I wanted to write a book. It's something that's like, since I was little, I've always wanted to write multiple books. It's a medium that I feel very comfortable in. I remember my mom's voice. I'm from Virginia, right? My mom was always big on thank you notes. So I, even at like 8 years old, wrote thank you notes for everything. And I written one to my mom's boss, who was like a doctor. And I remember my mom came home and said, he says that you write like very poetic, like Shakespearean or something, as like an 8-year-old. I just like loved the medium, and it was a way for me to express myself.
That's really cool.
Yeah. But so like I kept really, when I was really in this incredibly toxic environment, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to wait anymore to write. Like, I need a creative outlet. I need something to feed my soul. I need to help other people. I've got to do something. Like, I can't just be in this toxicity all the time. And I ended up going to a Hay House writers workshop. Hay House is not who published my book, just as a disclaimer, but I like switched a flight from New York, like this like 2 weeks before, bought a ticket, ended up in Oregon at this Hay House writers workshop. And one of I'm looking around my room because I have her book staring right at me, but one of the speakers was Rebecca Campbell. And I had never bought her book, which our mutual friend Kayla is obsessed with, by the way. She reads it with her meditation like every day. I didn't know anything about it. I had her book in my backpack. It was complete divine intervention. Literally, I was with a girlfriend of mine in New York like 2 days before. Someone else came in. They had gone on a retreat, and I was like, I think that woman's book is in my bag. I mean, so many synchronicities.
That's so crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, she's like, oh, she changed my life. I'm like, what's happening? And we're having all these conversations. And before I know it, like 2 days later, I'm in Oregon at this thing. I'm not even knowing that the woman whose book in my bag was speaking at the conference. And she led us through this guided meditation. And I went to the conference thinking I was going to write my book on one thing. And in this guided meditation, she took us through this journey. And in this journey, we kind of step into, this building of our choosing. And for me, it ended up being the Parthenon, like the one in Greece. No idea why, which I'm going to tidbit into that because we're full in the circle now, because I've never shared this with anyone before. And it definitely ties in. And I step in and she's like telling me things like, this person's going to approach you. And the person was already approaching me in my meditation before it was happening. Then she'd be like, and now they're going to hand you your book. And like 20 seconds earlier, they had picked up the book and handed it in my hands. And it was this out of body experience where it was almost like the old school TV delays where what she was saying was happening after what was actually happening in my meditation. And the meditation was like, you are going to write a book on Kundalini. You are going to bring this medicine to the masses. You have been chosen. I know you feel alone. I know you feel like nobody understands you. I know you don't feel supported by your family of origin. You have me. You have all of these Kundalini masters behind us and everyone in the spiritual journey behind you. You were never alone. Everything has ever happened in your life has come up to this point, and you are meant to write this book. And I woke up and it was much more, I know we're on a short podcast. I mean, we could talk about this offline. It was a much more intense experience than that because it was like a 20-minute meditation.
Oh, okay.
And I woke up and kind of like had one of those, like, even my heart's like racing really fast right now because it was so just out of body intense. And I was like, okay. So that happened. And I guess I found Kundalini, and my work situation got even worse and everything crumbled. And like 4 months later, I found myself, on a plane to India studying, Kundalini at the feet of masters in Rishikesh, which is like literally the yoga capital of the world, studying the history, studying everything behind it. And even after that, I just kept having these out of body experiences where I kept feeling called to go to different places and was getting like signs and visions and all sorts of stuff happening. And I extended my trip like another 4 months. And I even felt called to go to Athens, felt called to go to Greece. And I actually went to the Parthenon, and I had my first legitimate, there was like this full moon event. And for one of the only time they ever do it a year, they opened up the Parthenon Museum to like the public for free.
And you got to go.
And they did it at night, and it was full moon and everything was going on. And when I got to the top floor of that museum, I literally had a full blown past life regression where I was like sitting there. I was like, I've been here before. I know that stone. I was like crying. It was like this whole thing. And I'm like, what is happening? I'm like, I am literally having this experience where
That's so incredible.
Yeah. And upon reflection later, I was like, oh my gosh, that's why I picked the Parthenon. Like, that's why this spiritual experience happened. Okay. And I could go into so many other details of things like this, but when you ask the question of like, why this happened, there's some things in our lives that we just know we have to do. right? It's like, you don't understand it. You don't know why. And part of what Kundalini or any form of spiritual meditation practice where you come back home to yourself, continuing over and over again, it helps you build that trust muscle that when you say yes, it's going to be okay. It may be hard. It may be arduous. You may feel like you've lost everything. You may be like, I was literally having this conversation with one of my spiritual teachers yesterday because I'm going through another dark night of the soul, having just moved to LA, changed my life all over again.
Transitions, yeah.
Totally. And I was like, you know what? Again, like, this is one of the reasons why I see Phoenix everywhere. It's like Phoenix rising from the ashes, like constantly burning down the old paradigm and rising in a new one. And, it just, Kundalini is like a quick hit fix to help you feel those emotions, move through them, and understand how to experience them in your heart center or in your body, and in a way that when they happen, you no longer are moving through life half asleep. You're moving through life fully aware, or at least partially aware. And it may hurt like hell, because part of being blissfully unawares is the fact that we don't deal with those things. And I will disclaim it right now, like, anybody who's on this journey, it gets way worse before it gets better. Like, it hurts like hell, and it hurts like hell all the time. Because it's like, once you see, you can't unsee, right? Once you feel, you can't unfeel. And once you kind of come in contact with parts of yourself that you've thrown in your shadow, or you've disassociated from yourself, or you see things in a new way with the new reality, and you call in new people like you and I meeting, and that are in alignment and those sort of things. Once you start doing that, you got to come face to face with a lot of ish, and it sucks. But what's worse, being completely asleep and numb, or finding the courage and that inner strength that you didn't even know you had to come face to face with things, to deal with them and deal with yourself first and foremost, and then find a way through.
All of that was so amazing, but I still have a burning question that I wanted to save to let you kind of walk through all that. What were you planning on writing about for the book before? Because you mentioned that you went into that writer's retreat with a different idea in your head. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, I was totally I had this like vision of like this really pretty book. I've also never told anybody this, so you're getting all the good juicy stuff.
Awesome.
I had this vision of like a hippie woo-woo dictionary where I was trying to like, so I love learning and breaking things down, but it was kind of like a way that you would like find something in like anthro kind of, and I hope
yeah. That does sound really cool, and I feel like you should still do it anyway. But this one was a better, in my opinion, like better first one to start with, because like it was so deeply inside of you and meant to come up.
Yeah, and the dictionary was meant to just kind of dispel the woo, because that's what part of it is too, is like, I truly believe that a lot of the things that we see that have completely, destroyed our society in history, and or especially in the past year, is just on education and understanding of things that maybe we weren't exposed to before. And that's part of, I mean, my book's titled like Kundalini Yoga Demystified.
I was going to say, I'm assuming that's the reason for the title. Yeah.
Totally, because Kundalini can be scary. Like, if you've never meditated before, you've never done anything, and especially in the West. So there's different lineages of Kundalini. I went to study what was technically called traditional Kundalini yoga. And I talk about this a lot in the book, because the book builds on itself, like live like a yogi, eat like a yogi, breathe like a yogi. Like, it goes through the processes to give you the history and the yogic science behind it, setting up the foundation. So you understand like why yogis, quote unquote, wake up early, and the science behind that, or why most yogis are vegetarians, and like literally the yogic science for millennia behind that as well. And the demystified thing is how Kundalini got brought to the West was by a guy named Yogi Bhajan, a guy, man, spiritual teacher, guru, whatever you want to call him. And he was Sikh, which is, a lineage in India where people were all white in his lineage most of the time, which all white is nothing new in the spiritual practice. Like, people have also been doing that across every race, religion, color, culture, creed, as a form of like purity and whatever they believe in for that as well. And also in his lineage, people wear turbans, right? also never something new. You've got like kippas in Judaism, like you've got all sorts of things in Catholicism, like every other religion, a lot of people use head coverings as part of their spiritual practice as well. But it would not be unheard of for you to book a Kundalini class, especially in like a New York City and an LA, walking into a room with people wearing all white, turbans on their heads, their arms flailing in the air and doing some crazy breath work and knowing like a couple mantras. And you would be like, bye, right? Like, because you'd be like, wait, what just happened to my life? And like,
that's what I signed up for. Yeah.
Well, and it's not that all of that isn't like magic in its own right. It just tends to be maybe so different from
intimidating.
Yeah, it's just because like there's some things that are similar, but like without the context of like, oh wait, in a lot of other cultures, people do wear head coverings in spiritual practices. I've never thought about that this way, but this is just another manifestation than this. And like, oh wait, I grew up Southern Baptist, like we sing hymns. Like, oh wait, when people are chanting mantras, how is that different than like singing hymns in Sunday service? Like, okay, that makes a little bit of sense, right? Like and I talk about that a lot in my book to kind of connect those dots, because it does feel different, but at the core, we all kind of, no matter who you believe in and what you believe in and how you were raised, like there's different pieces of culture and religion and society that we all take from each other. They just look different on the surface, and demystifying it starts at the most basic level with stuff like that. There's in a Kundalini practice, like people talk about their sadhana practice, right? That literally just means like a dedicated time or dedicated daily practice. That's it. Like,
and that shows up in so many ways for people.
Yeah. I mean,
they don't even necessarily call it a spiritual thing, right?
If you go to the gym every day, like
there you go. Right.
Right. Like if you like literally take your dog for a walk, you have a daily practice. If you have a cup of coffee every morning,
that's your daily practice.
That is part of your ritual. That is part of your daily practice. So like, it's all half dozen of another, right? But when something can present as really foreign, a lot of times it is uncomfortable just because we're uncomfortable in the discomfort of not feeling, like any of that seems familiar, because anything new is scary. It doesn't matter whether you're starting a new job. It doesn't matter whether you're pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. It doesn't matter if you're a 3-year-old trying new food for the first time, right? Like it's always going to be scary. And part of what the yoga practice does, honestly, is put you face to face with things that kind of make you a little bit uncomfortable and gives you a way, again, to move through that tunnel and process those emotions in a safe container, because it doesn't matter where you are. It's that whole concept. One of the things that Kundalini talks about a lot, and I'm just going to go on a little bit of a tangent because this is a different modality. So there's, people think of spiritual practice, they think of non-attachment, right? Kundalini is not rooted in non-attachment. Kundalini at its core believes, and I believe, that we are abundant in every way. And I really hope that everybody gets anything and everything on this material plane and beyond that they've ever wanted. Like if having a, $20 million house in Malibu is going to fulfill your soul's journey, and because maybe you have that much money, now you're able to give abundantly to other people and help solve the homeless population in LA and do all these magnificent things for the world, like bring it, have it. I want you to have that $20 million house and more, like here, like, but it's about being able to like hold that energy and hold the energy of others around you in a way that is not overwhelming, that doesn't cause you to do flight, fight, and freeze, which is another thing that we could talk about. And it's a way to believe that like we're all abundant, that we're all worthy of anything and everything that we've ever wanted, especially when it comes from an authentic soul purpose. And it's about strengthening your energy field so that you can hold all those things. It's like when somebody, you hear the stories about people winning the lottery and then they lose all their money in a year. Like they literally those individuals haven't strengthened their aura enough to hold that much expansion coming at them at one time, right?
Yeah.
Like somebody like, Jeff Bezos obviously has figured out a way to play with that energy field, like move money here, move money there. Like he's in the ether, and And by strengthening our aura and by working on our daily practice and by like learning how to sit with our emotions and stuff, when our manifestations come through and when that abundance comes, you can sit with it, you can be grateful for it, and you can keep moving forward. Because if we don't do the work to learn how to get our bodies into parasympathetic and come back home to ourselves and ground, when you get all those manifestations, you want your podcast to be, you mentioned Lewis Howes, right? You want to be the next Lewis Howes, right?
Great.
So let's manifest that, right? Like, okay, great. So you want it, but you're doing it because you want to help people, and you're doing it because it comes from a heart center place, and you're doing it because your voice helps shape the world in a way that will bring people home to themselves, come back to their heart center, be comfortable in their bodies, right? Like feel comfortable walking in their own skin. By doing the inner work though, when those opportunities comes and when that manifestation shows up, you will be able to hold it and not just hold
ready for it.
Amplify your works. You can amplify the healing in the world. That's what this is about. It's about doing it so that like when your manifestations come through, you make the most of the opportunity when it comes, and you keep using it as a power for good. And that tidal wave keeps going and keeps going. And that ripple effect keeps showing up in the world, out and out and out. So that you help as many people as possible on this earthly plane and beyond through your soul's work. And Kundalini is a method that helps us in that daily practice, train our central nervous system, train our heart, train our soul, and honestly learn how to listen to our soul's calling so that all of that energy that you're putting out there is putting in the most aligned and authentic way, because you're coming from the most aligned and authentic version of yourself.
You touched on it, and I definitely want to go there also because we've been joking about like woo-woo things, etc., and hippy dippy, like, yeah. But there is so much science around the importance of your parasympathetic nervous system, learning how to activate it, how powerful the breath is. And I think we would be remiss to finish this conversation and not bring that element into it. And, you know, I want to acknowledge something else that you said too, just in the book specifically, and you do a great job of describing it here as well, is being able to put things into the context of like the example you provided was you grew up with one religion, you've explored so many other spiritual modalities, and it's all tying back to, well, we judge it because it's unfamiliar, it's different, or whatever it is. And I think that idea kind of also aligns with this comparison of the hippy dippy piece versus the actual science behind it. So if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit more about the importance of your parasympathetic, nervous system being activated, and why we don't necessarily get in tune with that. We talked about the fact that like not even putting our phones in do not disturb can really trigger those sorts of things from not necessarily going the direction we want it to go. But I don't think enough people understand it. And I think that's where the lack of like, oh, this isn't that important mentality comes from.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, the water that we drink, that we put into our bodies, I mean, our bodies, about this in the book. Like one of the first things that I did when I moved to LA is like, I can finally get Mountain Valley spring water delivered to my place. And I'm like, yes, like that is like the most important thing I do in my day is I give myself like the cleanest, freshest, most nourishing water possible, which I know, like, even if I eat like a pint of ice cream or something, I'm like, at least I drink really good water today, you know, like in all seriousness, the breath work really helps oxygenate the blood, right? And get that oxygen through all aspects of our body. And most of us are really shallow breathers, myself included. I catch myself all the time when I am in a stressful situation, legitimately holding my breath. I'm not breathing at all. So there's so I can teach you even just the quickest technique for any of that ever. It's a yogic technique called the 1 minute breath. It literally takes 1 minute. If you've never done it before, it will stress you out because your lungs will not know what to do and you won't have the capacity for it. But the short version is you literally breathe in for 20 seconds, you hold your breath for 20 seconds, and you breathe out for 20 seconds.
Okay. So it's like a very extended version of, say, the 7 to 8 count breath of box breathing.
100%. Okay. And you could, I mean, if you really wanted to box breathe, like you could do that as well, which does sort of the same thing. But you'll notice if you've never done it before, it's like training yourself how to breathe underwater. You're a swimmer.
Sure. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I feel like I was better at this years ago. And now since I wasn't in the pool consistently after college at all, it'd be interesting. I wish I could do like a little experiment where I could have compared it a couple of years ago.
Totally, right? I mean, and this is what I mean by when I talk about the whole reason why the book's called Kundalini Yoga Demystified is because like this stuff is real and applicable today. You don't have to sit on a meditation pillow. You don't have to like wear all white. You don't have to go pilgrim to anywhere. Like you can literally just be sitting at your desk and realizing that your anxiety is at a 10. You need to bring it down to a 4 because you are about like, you can't think clearly, you can't see clearly. Like, who knows if you're about to go off on your coworker or write an email that you shouldn't write, or like maybe you don't have opportunity to even just like go walk outside and breathe some fresh air. So you can literally sit at your desk and just eyes open. You can sit in a meeting. I've done this in conference rooms before with like 20 people where I'm like, okay, this is getting a little out of hand. I need to make sure that my energy is at a calm and emotionally stable place so that I can clearly see the situation and kind of help drive the ship back in the direction that will be productive for all. Right. You can tell I'm getting into my work mode. I'm starting to talk like I'm in that business.
Yeah.
But and you literally just breathe in for 20 seconds, and you'll notice like I'm making motions because people probably aren't watching this, but when we shallow breathe or when we're prone to holding our breath, we only kind of breathe into like the top 10% of our lungs, and you know what the lungs look like. They're bigger and then they kind of go down to the point. The more that we can bring that oxygen into the full completeness of the lungs, however you visualize it, like in Pilates, I was a Pilates instructor as well. Really talk about expanding it horizontally, like out from your rib cage.
Through the rib cage, yeah.
You can think about it that way. In yoga, a lot of times they focus a little bit more on like the belly breathing, like going all the way down to your abdomen. Sometimes people really focus on breathing to the back of your lungs because let's be honest, we're focused on our heart and the palpitations that are happening with that we don't think about the backside of our body. You can switch it up, think of different ways that you want to do it, but taking that 20 seconds, you'll notice that it is really hard to one Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi for 20 seconds and then holding it and then letting it go. And I ironically am better always at breathing in and the holding, the breathing out. I just want to so much faster. It's so hard for me to even get those 3 parts together to sync up. So I suggest starting with 10 seconds, right? Breathe in for 10, hold for 10, breathe out. Maybe do that a time or 2, maybe bump it up to 12, maybe bump it up to 15, 16. And even just the simple act of doing that at every red light, say at every red light you're in your car, what, I'm going to, during this, instead of picking up my phone and scrolling, right? Instead of looking over or zoning out. I mean, if you want to sing at the top of your lungs like that, I feel like has got to
do it.
That's
good cathartic.
Yeah. So like, let's say not that, but instead of like, if you're singing at the top of your lungs, just keep rolling with it. But like, if you're picking up your phone to scroll through your Instagram or check your text or check your email or do whatever, instead of doing that, literally try the 1-minute breath at every stoplight moving on, and it will change your life. You will be showing up as so much more of a grounded individual in every situation that you will start reacting to things from a place of strength. You will start being proactive in things that you would have normally only been reactive in, and people will start to notice. I mean, part of the reason why I wrote this book is because I was living that crazy New York life and working with brokers and suits all the time. And guys that I was working with started coming up to me and saying, Erin, something's different. Like, what's going on?
Like, what is this aura about you? Yeah,
totally. They're like, what's happening? Like you're becoming a different person. And it's like, I finally figured out how to meditate and discovered this thing called Kundalini. And I'm like, it's very, very much a work in progress, but I'm trying and it's helping me. It's helping me show up differently in really stressful situations. It's helping me show up differently just in life in general. And their response was, well, is there like a video? Or is there like a book?
They wanted a resource.
Yeah. And at the time there wasn't. I'm not saying that it isn't more widely spread. I feel like the world is like perfectly primed for Kundalini in this exact moment. But like back then, people were like, what are you talking about? Kunda what? One of the chapters is literally like Kunda what? Yes. Because like, what the heck is this crazy? Can you spell that please? Like, who knows what this thing is? But it's really so important. And I'm going to talk about it purely just from like, not just from when our body is in flight, fright, and freeze, and one of the things that I wanted to talk about, I know that we're probably going long, but one of the things that hasn't
Keep
really
going. You're good.
Okay. Hasn't really been talked about in mainstream at the moment is everyone always refers to it as flight and fright. And this is part of our society's issue with the fact that so many of studies are done purely on individuals with male anatomy. And I'm not identifying however you identify, non-binary, male, female, anything. But if you were born into this world with male genitalia, most of the experiments and things have in our society are done based on that.
It's a big problem in the nutrition space, especially. I like a lot of the other people that I work with really have had a lot of conversations about this more recently because of hormones with endocrine disruption and women, whether you're looking at something as major as infertility or just issues with weight loss, and how a lot of the research just doesn't actually provide context because of who is involved in the study. So it's a real thing.
Well, yeah. So this is, to be fully in your wheelhouse in this exact second, think about people who train for a triathlon or a marathon and women are like, I don't understand, I gained weight. It's like, well, yeah, because you were following the training methods that are meant for men that don't have 4 different luteal cycles every month. Literally as women, right after our cycle, we have hormone changes where we are amped. And by women, I'm talking about people specifically born with a womb, not somebody who identifies in any way. I'm talking the actual hormonal, womb-based hormones coming through your body. If you're not supplementing in any way, shape, or form, we have an amp in energy. So right after a cycle, you might be able to go for a 12-mile run, right? And you might be able to do some of that stuff. You might be able to swim. You might be able to do a bunch of HIIT workouts and do all of the other things that you're going to do. And then closer to your cycle and in your cycle, maybe you should do some more Pilates and maybe you should do some more yoga and those sort of things, because our hormones change, what our bodies need change. The food that we need in our body in each one of those luteal cycles is completely different and changes. And it's a real problem, even from the standpoint. So from that aspect of things, there's not enough research done on the different hormonal capacities of the different sexes. And then on top of that, people have always talked about flight and fight, but one thing that people don't talk about is freeze. And as a woman,
I don't hear people talk about that a lot, to be honest, because I've had people come on the show and talk about fight or flight.
It's such a problem. And I'm super, super passionate about this and about the thing, because think about it. If we're doing the caveman example, right? Fight or flight. If you were 6 foot, right, burly man, there's a lion and whatever mammoth back in the day, I don't know, somebody's coming at you trying to hurt you. You're either going to fight or you're going to run, right? But the woman in those groups, the traditional caretaker, most likely had children in tow. Right?
That's why she's gonna freeze.
That's why she's freezing. That's why she plays dead. She's responsible for making sure, because back in that day, right, if we're talking purely anthropological, back in that day, men would go off for weeks, they would hunt, they would do whatever they would think. Women would gather maybe close to home, but they kept in their really sacred women's circles, which is another reason why women's circles and any form of circles around the moon and all that are so powerful, because this is ancestral lineage stuff coming. It's not just about, and I talk a lot about the moon and the cycles and that sort of stuff in it, because that's really, really big yogic science. But to put another spin on it, there's a lot of anthropological and history behind the fact that all happened. There's a reason why women's cycles synced up when they were around each other, especially back in those times. And if you think about it, a lot of people talk about, and I'm just going to go to the dark place because here we are, when you talk about people with sexual assault, a lot of women freeze.
Yeah.
It is one of those defense mechanisms, because they can't fight. They may not be able to outrun, and they completely numb out and freeze. And as a woman who is a survivor of multiple sexual assaults herself, I can attest to the fact that is what I did. And it wasn't until I understood this and did more research and was learning more about our nervous system and how our bodies work and the hormonal balances. And even this, again, from an anthropological standpoint of things, that I was like, oh my God, that was my way of protecting myself. I could give myself some grace around the fact that okay, maybe I didn't fight back and maybe I didn't run, but this has been ingrained in me that this is a way that I could save myself, because if I just froze, hopefully it would be over. Hopefully I would move on. Hopefully myself would be protected enough that I wouldn't be expired or anything dramatic, like even worse than what was happening to me happen. And I would move on. And women especially use freeze as a defense mechanism. If some guy comes up to your girlfriend in a bar, grabs her ass, you're going to be like, I'm sorry, come again? Like, I know you did not just do that to my friend, right? Some guy comes up in a bar and grabs your ass, you freeze.
Yeah. I'm
90%
smiling because you're right. You're so right. Yeah.
Because you're literally like, wait, what just happened? Like your body shuts down because you're in like, wait, am I safe? And your whole body is going through all of these systems, especially if you've had any experience with any form of trauma, right? Especially most of the time, your body's going to freeze because you're like, wait, am I safe? Am I not safe? What's the situation? Where's my exit? Did that just happen? What is around me? And you're really evaluating everything on a completely subconscious, subterranean level, trying to figure out what's okay and like how to react, how to exit, are you safe, like that sort of thing. And fight and flight is a real thing. But as women, I would beg to say that the majority of the time, freezing is our default in situations, at least with individuals who might be bigger than us, stronger than us, in a power, like in some form of situation that they have more quote unquote power, especially if it has to do with our job, our livelihood, our ability to pay for our bills, our safety, stability. Even as a single woman, if somebody is doing that to you in the workplace, like that affects your ability to put a roof over your head. That is foundational security, baseline. Am I safe? Can I survive tomorrow? Stuff. So people may make light of these sort of things and just act like it's workplace banter and stuff, but like on a subterranean level, your body is evaluating, like literally if you're going to be able to pay your mortgage next month because you're about to blow shit up at work because this person is harassing you.
It makes a lot of sense. It really does.
So to go back without completely going down that rabbit hole, because we could talk about that for...
We could have a whole podcast on that, right?
Totally, yeah. Right? But the reason why these practices and Kundalini works for me, right? And it's one of the tools in my toolkit. It is by no means the thing that I do all day, every day, and never do anything else. There's a million other types of meditation that I do.
You talked about going to therapy yourself.
Totally. Walking my pup in nature, being your water, like again, Pisces moon, right? Like your moon, people, just for a quick background on astrology, there's your sun sign is when people ask you what your sign is. It's also called your sun. Like I was born November 23rd. So I'm a Sagittarius. So if someone asks you what your sun is, like I would be a Sagittarius. Your moon is your emotional landscape. So it's kind of how you mute and process it's like, mutable sign for your emotional. So if you want to dive a little bit deeper into it, you can kind of learn a little bit more about how you process your emotions by studying your moon sign. And then your rising is kind of the persona that you put into the world, or maybe how other people see you, which it's really interesting, I think, since we're going down, this path of self-discovery, to look at how other people might perceive you. And so for me, my sun sign is a Leo. I honestly don't resonate with that a lot because Leos have this stigma of like center of attention, these sort of things. And yes, I can feel comfortable in a room of big people, feel comfortable speaking, but like if you want me to like walk down the Hollywood Walk of Fame, people taking pictures and the things, like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. But if we're in this type of situation and I'm sharing stuff from a heart-centered space, and I know that it's going to affect a lot of people and stuff, I feel very, very passionate about that. But again, shadow side of things, right? Like everything has a dark and a light, a sun and a moon. And yogic science is a lot about that. It's about honoring both sides. And in the book, even just to touch on this, because it's really important to say, is, everything that is in the yogic science talks about masculine and feminine. And this has nothing to do with how you identify. It's the fact that we all each have masculine and feminine within us. We have masculine components, we have feminine components, we have different sides that we tap into each day. And the yogic science behind it really starts to honor the fact that, even from like an internal standpoint, like it really is non-binary. Like we have both sides of our personality. There's light and there's dark. There's a sun and there's a moon. There's Mary Magdalene and Jesus and Shiva and Shakti. And like, there's always like opposite, yin and yang. I'm like making the halves of the whole symbol for anybody is not seeing. But it really talks about that. And it really talks about how a lot of the things that we do in yoga, and especially Kundalini, it's about getting the spine straight so that like when your Kundalini energy moves, it's dipping equally into your masculine energy and your feminine energy back and forth, and creating this kind of channel through the middle where you're experiencing both in equal proportion, right? So you're coming as a whole, aligned, balanced self. It's like one of the first things I said when we talked about doing the Kundalini is just
sit up.
To make sure you're sitting straight, so your spine's straight, and that's so that the energy has a way to move. The energy has a way to dip in and out. And in yoga, but especially in Kundalini, they talk about these like energy points within your body called the nadis. Think about it like acupuncture meridians. Again, every modality says some form of the same thing, just in a different way. And the three most important are your Ida, your Pingala, and your Sushumna. The Sushumna is like the main one going straight up and down your spine. And the Ida and the Pingala, one's masculine, one's feminine. And it's believed your Kundalini energy lies dormant beneath your lower chakra. And it's represented as a snake coiled 3.5 times. And the idea is that when you awake your Kundalini energy, you awake this power from below you, from beneath you, that's always been there all along. This is not grasping for anybody else to save you. This is you being your own king, queen, non-binary crown on your head, straight, like running shit with the person that you were meant to be in this world. You come in with that power, and the Kundalini energy kind of moves up your chakras like a snake. And that snake crosses each one of your chakras, like in the middle. So for each chakra, your Ida, your Pingala, and your Sushumna all intersect in between. And the whole point is literally just to unblock each of those chakras. Your Kundalini energy can continue to move upwards and freely, and really just igniting every other nadi in your body, and just creating this I imagine the neurons when you see pictures of brains like firing, right?
Yeah.
Like this is the visual that
That's
I have.
Really cool.
So I have in my head, it's like you're igniting it, and you're making each one of those neurons fire, and you see the little kind of like glowy thing, and it spreads
all connected.
Yeah. And you just are like, you're just awakening your own power. Like it hasn't, like you're not grasping for anything from anyone else. It's all inside you. You're just using this modality to help clear all of those blocks, to help push. It's almost like a pipe in a drain, right? Like some of the reasons I talk about this in the book too, there's, to get more advanced, there's these things called bandhas, which are like locks. And what you kind of do is you hold your breath and you like squeeze certain muscles in your body. And the idea is like, if you have a drain that's clogged, right? You use a plunger, because you push on the plunger and it builds that pressure. And then finally pushes it through and pushes that blockage through the drain. That is literally what you're doing with your breath. You're holding your breath, you're building the pressure, you're squeezing your muscles, tightening everything. So you build up that pressure behind it. And then when you release it, you push past the block. So like, these are it's all interconnected. And these are the type of things that happen, because like you can move that block and you can move that energy. And then we keep moving the breath, or we keep moving the arms, you move it out. It's gone. Yeah. You don't ever have to deal with it again. Like it's done. Like, this is not like, you get a massage and you forget to drink water, and then the toxins build up, and then like you have a bigger knot in some other part that didn't happen. Like, this is what that is. It's like using the breath as like lubricating the body from the inside out. It's the water. It's the water moving the toxins from your massage, right? It's like you're building it up, you're switching it up, you're changing the energy, like you're getting all this stuff moving, and then you're using the breath to get it out and get it out. And then not just that, we use arms and we use mantras and we use other things to like get it out, and it's gone. And you don't have to deal with it again. Like, it's done. Doesn't mean there aren't 9,000 like mini clogs all over your body that you're going to have to keep clearing.
Keep doing it. Yeah.
For this lifetime and a gazillion other whatever you believe in, right? But you get a little bit closer and you get a little bit clearer and you get a little bit less constricted and a little bit less blocked. And then when really crazy stuff happens, like a pandemic, it doesn't mean that you don't have a really hard time, but you now have tools to like help you move that energy, to not get us stuck, to help you move through it so that you can feel your emotions and keep going, feel your emotions and keep going, feel your emotions and keep going.
Amazing. Well, if you didn't already convince anybody at this point to get the book and read it, they absolutely should. And one thing I do want to say before we move into our lightning round, to just emphasize the way the book is intended to be read. And you've kind of touched on it throughout and mentioning these are tools. There's a lot of different pieces of actionable advice and suggestions that you can take and put into practice. I really liked how you talked about the fact that it's not the sort of book that's meant to be read like page from the front page to the back page in one sitting all the way through, and to take your time with it. So before we do kind of wrap up, I want you to talk about that, because I think that's important too. And I think it's really helpful to understand that, as this book is meant to be a guide for you and not necessarily something that you just sit with once and read it and go back to it later. You could keep going back to this, even if you're never going to be an expert, right? Because as you've said, Erin, throughout this is a lifelong journey and it's a process. But I think that really kind of set it up well for me. And I think it's important that people hear that from you too.
Yeah. I mean, it starts out, I mean, you could be the most advanced yogi in the world, and there will still be some nuggets in this for you. And maybe you breeze past the first couple ones because you're like, you've already got your daily practice. You're already used to, like, I mean, even talks about why you use a yoga mat, like something as foundational as that, like I was practicing yoga for like, I don't know, 10, 15 years.
And you didn't know why, right?
I didn't know until I went to India, and they're like, this is the science behind.
Yeah,
And I
that's
was
cool.
like, oh, I'm like, dope, got it. Like, I will never not use a meditation pillow or yoga mat now because I understand the intention. Like, okay, got it, cool. Right. So there's stuff like that for anyone. It doesn't matter who you are. And you might read a couple of the first chapters and just like, got it, next, done. Like, I mean, I've always loved, like I said, I love books and stuff. Like, one of my favorite things was always to do whenever I would buy a new cookbook, I would like go through and then I'd dog ear pages. Like, I literally have these little, I literally have tabs that I'm like, oh, this recipe looks nice. And oh, what about this? But I'm also somebody who cannot physically read a book without a pen in my hand. Like, I believe that books are living, breathing, interactive things, and they are here to like do whatever we need in the moment at the right time. Like, you could have a book in yourself for 20 years and not pick it up till then, and maybe you weren't ready for it until then.
Sure.
I mean, truly, like, but the vibration and energy behind that book is still in your space and still breathing life into the air that you breathe. And, you know, if you want to dog ear pages, you want to mark notes on that. If you're like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that, I should tag this page and talk to my therapist about this next week, like whatever you need to do to help you move through it. You know, you could read through the first couple of chapters in lightning speed, or you could read through the whole book and be like, oh, I want to come back and put some tabs and here are a couple exercises I want to try. There's no wrong way to do it, but it is set up so that it's the foundation of it first, so that each chapter builds on each other, so that you learn how first to sit properly, so that when you do the exercises, they actually are effective, right? Like, so it's built in that way, like, here's why it's usually done this time of day, and you can take it or leave it. If that doesn't resonate with you, fine, move on. Like, there's nothing, I don't believe in the hard press rules and anything. The only thing that I would say is that Kundalini very much is a science, and the way that the exercises are actually done is a science. You can go to any yoga class and any Kundalini class in the world, and it's not like a vinyasa flow where somebody does this first and then somebody else does that, and maybe Shavasana is longer, maybe somebody doesn't do that. Like, literally each one of the, like the magnificent meditation or the fists of anger or the 1 minute breath, like any of those actual Kundalini exercises will be taught the same way no matter what.
Okay.
Because there is a true tried and true science behind the exercises. The rest of it, I still believe that you do it at the way that you want. And instead of a 5 minute or 11-minute exercise, if you want to start something with one and build from that, like, fine. You've got to go at your own pace. And at the heart of Kundalini is teaching you how to come home and really tap into your own intuition and what resonates with you. And if something doesn't resonate with you, I'm giving full permission right now to just move forward with it. And think about it this way. Like what works for you at this exact moment in your life may not work for you 6 months from now.
Yeah. I tell my clients that all the time, and with nutrition, and I've experienced that so much. And I keep saying this to people a lot as I've recently gotten new clients or have been working with somebody for a while, that you have to remember that anything I'm sharing with you about the way you approach your food, it's just a tool. But whatever that tool is, you need to understand that the way it's going to ultimately work for you, no matter what, is that you take the elements from it that are realistic for you right now, today, versus trying to change your entire life to meet the expectations of this diet because it worked for somebody else.
100%. And this is how I tell people, I'm like, look, you can do anything for 5 minutes, right? Here's my number one piece of advice. If you are interested in starting any form of meditative practice, it doesn't have to be Kundalini. Like, I am here for you to live your best life, be your best self, have anything and everything you ever wanted. It doesn't, like, this book is a tool for you if that helps you and if that serves you. Otherwise, I still wish you like all of the abundance and happiness and love in the world. So my biggest suggestion when people want to start meditating for the first time, I'm like, look, whether or not you have a partner, you can do this. Before you roll over and grab your phone, before you turn and put your feet on the floor, literally sit your booty up, take your pillow that you just had your head on, stick it underneath your hips to elevate it a little bit, because most of us have really tight hips from sitting all the time, just to elevate it so you can get that straight spine. It's just about the straight spine. It's not about how flexible you are, like no judgment. Wherever you're at is perfect. And literally start by doing that before you do anything else, even if you only start with a 1 minute breath. Maybe you don't do it. Your significant other, your latest fling, I don't know, your puppy can be asleep next to you and no one will ever know. Like literally just sit your booty up on that pillow. Start with a 1 minute breath. Start with fists of anger. Start with the meditation to heal. Meditation to heal addictions is silent. Okay. When I tell you this is magic, I started doing meditation to heal addictions at the beginning of this year, like January 1st. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it like 40 days and something. I'm going to like commit to it. I'm really
see what happens from it.
See what happens. Like, let's just play with the ether. Who knows? Like, no judgment. I'm going to do it for 3 minutes, 3 minutes every morning, first thing. Can I tell you that it was around Valentine's Day? So a month and a half in, and I was like, I haven't had coffee for like a week and a half.
And you didn't notice.
Didn't even know, because as addictions go, I guess for me, that was low hanging fruit, right? And I didn't even know. But then let's be honest, the second that I realized I hadn't had coffee.
You're like, let me go get a cup.
Totally. I was like, I really want some coffee. And the addiction was like full on in full swing. But I had been doing this meditation for 3 minutes every day. And that is something that people wouldn't normally think of as like a major addiction you're trying to break. Yeah. It can be the negative self-talk in your head. If you do meditation to heal addictions for 3 minutes every morning, which I kid you not is dead silent, there's no heavy breathing, there's no arms flailing. Anyone who might be next to you will never know what you're doing. It is like the most stealth meditation that, like, if somebody else is sleeping, you're totally fine. Like, you will notice that you are kinder to yourself, because we are all addicted to that negative self-talk. Mm-hmm. We are all addicted to that negative voice in our head. You will start being kinder to yourself. And when you start being kinder to yourself, you start loving yourself more. And when you start loving yourself more, you start saying no to situations that no longer serve you, because you're standing in your power. And you start saying no to people who no longer serve you. And you start to do things that bring you more joy and bring you more happiness. And then that happiness vibrates to everyone you come in contact, whether you're saying hi to the person at the grocery store or the person watering their flowers or walking their dog on the street. And then their day gets a little bit better because you were kinder to them, right? And it just creates this ripple effect throughout the world, purely based on the fact that you took 3 minutes of your morning to sit your booty up first on a pillow without waking anybody else up, paying yourself first, mind, body, spirit, because that's what you're doing. You're paying yourself first. Like, you are worth everything. And whatever you think you're worth, add tax, because you're freaking worth more than you think you are, right? So take whatever you think you are and at least add 20% and tax to that. And you sit up on your pillow and you do it. And for 3 minutes, you literally change your entire community, your entire ecosystem, because the people that are in the house with you, the people that are walking on the street with you, the people that you interact with on your conference calls, the people you're looking at over Zoom, like, it literally ripples effect, like skipping a stone out into the world. And you will not only change your life, you will change the life of anyone who is even in remote proximity around you and the world. Truly.
And who doesn't want more of that, right?
Yeah, we all deserve love and kindness and compassion and connection. And like we just, you can get the $20 million house in Malibu, but if you don't love yourself first, you're going to be just as miserable in the $20 million house, 20,000, 20, like that would be nice if it was 20,000, but $20 million house in Malibu, like you're going to be just as empty and just as much pain if you don't love yourself first. And in order to love yourself fully, you got to love the shadow too. And you got to come face to face with that darkness because we all have it. I am not anywhere close to perfect. I am far from it, but I start to love my imperfections a little bit more. And when I start to slip into those numbing behaviors and I start to slip into those old self-deprecating tendencies and talks and stuff, I find that the more that I do this work and the more years I put into this and the more times I daily practice it, I'm able to, at the very least, give myself a little grace around it and say like, oh, okay, we're doing that again. Noted. Every moment is a moment to choose again. Let me take this moment to say, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. At least not. And I recognized it. I saw it. I'm going to make a different choice. And if I fall off the wagon again tomorrow and I'm mean to myself again, or I do some numbing technique or do any of the things that we all do every day, you know what? I can choose again and I can start over again and again and again.
I love that. I think that's so beautiful. And I really appreciate everything you shared today. I could keep going, but I do want to be respectful of your time. And before we finish this up, the most important question is tell us where we can get the book.
Yeah, so it's available now. It's available in all the places. I do like you can go Amazon and pretty much, Amazon right now because everyone's still ordering everything. Yeah. It's pre-orderable right now. And on top of that, I send a lot of kind of free tips and emails like this out with my weekly emails. So if you sign up for my email, I've got three meditations that you can have right now in your hands, even before the book comes out. And I'm also in the process of recording a couple of them myself so that if you purchase the book and then you put your confirmation code in on the website, you'll also get 3 meditations with my voice kind of guiding through it as well to help you kind of start the practice. So it doesn't feel as lonely and you've got at least my voice in your ear kind of helping moving you through a couple of them as well.
That's awesome. And we'll be sure to link all of that down in the show notes along with where we can connect with you and everything. But before we get to the official end, I always wrap my episodes with a little fun lightning round. I don't plan any of these questions, but they're supposed to be like quick, short, fun responses. You ready?
Game.
All right. So let's keep with the yoga theme to start and maybe moving into the more traditional yoga sense. Do you have a favorite yoga flow or practice outside of Kundalini?
Yeah, I'm ride or die vinyasa for sure. Okay. I love it. And honestly, like one of the best online platforms you can use is Peloton. My favorite is Dennis Morton and then Ross Rayburn. Ross is like super technical, which like feeds my nerdy soul. I like love it. He's like talks in all like the actual anatomy terms and like why you do this in this way.
Cool.
And then Dennis has just like this sultry strong like male voice that you just like get into it and it's amazing.
This might be a hard question for you.
Yes.
Do you have an absolute favorite book of all time?
It changes all the time.
Let's say that.
I can tell you the ones that I just read and loved.
Okay. Cool.
I'm currently working my way through Cast, which I'm actually listening to because it is a very hard read, but one of the most important reads, 100%. It's raw and honest and to die for. Mary Magdalene Revealed, also to die for. I was raised Christian and just like her take in the history, and she's like a legitimate historian on all of that, is just so spiritual and next level and so rooted in all sorts of really amazingness. I'm also finishing Michael Pollan's newest book, This Is Your Mind on Plants, which I don't know why I picked it up and it wasn't what I was thinking. And it talks all about your mind on caffeine, your mind on opium, and like your mind on, it talks about plant medicine. And I've been to Peru and worked with a shaman and stuff in that way as well. So he's really diving into the science, not just from like a neurological, biological standpoint, from an anthropological standpoint. And it's really, really fascinating.
You've lived in a lot of different cities and have obviously traveled many places. Being most recently rooted on the West Coast, is there anything in particular that you really miss about the East Coast?
You know, this is a really good spin on this question, because people always ask me what my favorite place to live was. And my response is they were all the right place for that.
I knew you weren't going to pick a favorite, so I might have done this a little
No,
intentionally.
you did it perfectly. I've never thought of it this way, because there's so many things I miss about New York, for sure. New York will always have my soul. The West Village in particular, like when I go back there, I immediately, even just thinking about it, I'm starting to tear up, like my chest tightens. Like it is just a place that I feel more at home than almost any other place in the world. There's just something about New York City. I mean, the energy, the beauty. I mean, I love architecture. I mean, I went to school for interior design,
Yeah.
right? I love the architecture and the design and doing projects there, you know, even demoing old buildings and finding, you know, what laid under and the history behind that. And just the best part about New York, you know, I'm going to tangent, even though there's lightning round.
It's all right.
My girlfriends would come to visit me and they would be like, what should we wear? You know, what about this? I'm like, look, nobody cares.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
It's
I'm like,
so true. And people don't understand that unless they live there.
I'm like, this is the best part about New York. It's like you can be walking down the street with like a parrot on your head, a gerbil underneath your arm, right? And walking a lizard on a leash with like, I don't know, a hot pink see-through polka dot outfit. And people would be like, dope, dude, do you? Like nobody cares. Like they don't care because they don't care in the way that people traditionally think about New York.
Yeah.
They don't care because they're like, own it, like work it, own it, do you? Like awesome, preach, moving on with my day. Like there's no judgment around how you show up in your self-expression. If anything else, it is part of the culture and the landscape that I can't imagine New York without it. So there's always new restaurants popping up, or always new art exhibits, or always people expressing themselves through fashion or theater or whatever medium is their medium. And like that heart and soul of New York that is just like raw and honest and like in your face in the most beautiful, authentic way. Like I will never not long for that New York.
So well said. Love all of that. And last but not least, you've already touched on the book, but I usually wrap with the question of what's your shameless plug? So use this as the opportunity to tell us where we can connect with you, social media, all that. But I think to just take it to one more level, if you could tell someone who's made it all the way through the end of the show, if there's only one piece of advice they could take away from anything you've said, or maybe just something that you haven't shared, what would that be?
That you are whole and perfect exactly as you are. There is nothing wrong with you. You are smart, you are kind, you are intelligent, you're a good friend, your brother, sister, mother. Like you are exactly where you need to be, exactly how you're meant to be. And any pain that you're feeling, any heartache, any hurdle, any dark night of the soul, any grief that you're feeling is part of it. And know that every other person is going through it. And hopefully through listening to this podcast, you've given yourself a little bit more grace to feel those emotions fully, and know that we are here to love you and support you and hold you with open arms. And you are just whole and magnificent exactly as you are in this exact moment today and every day from here on out.
Beautiful. And tell us your Instagram handle and all that good stuff. Where's the best place to connect with you online? I'm assuming it's there.
Well, everything's at erinelizabethdowning.com or at Erin Elizabeth Downing. I actually just started Twitter because, you know, in these social media worlds, I got sucked into like the putting the quotes on the Instagram thing.
Yeah, I do that too. Everyone everyone likes them though. So you didn't just get sucked in it. I think they're fun. I like sharing them too.
I share them all the time, but
Same.
for some reason when I was doing them myself, it felt more like work. And you know what? I was like, you know, there's something that doesn't feel quite authentic about it in this medium, but to put it on Twitter feels fantastic. And to even share the Twitter ones like feels fantastic. So it's pretty much Erin Elizabeth. They cut off your name. So it's just DO at the end.
Okay.
but I send a ton of information in my weekly emails, a ton of complimentary stuff. I'm on Instagram. I'm pretty much, if you know my middle name, which is Elizabeth, Erin Elizabeth Downing, you can find me anywhere. There's always a way to connect, whether I'm doing speaking events, and now that the world is kind of opening back up again, we're planning some events out here in LA.
Great.
So as long as you got me on one of those, especially the emails, because I'll send out all of the first tickets for things, or discount codes or any of that sort of stuff goes through that medium. You can find me pretty much anywhere. I guess I'm an open book, but I'm ching, no pun intended.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Erin, for your time. I've absolutely loved this conversation. I could seriously keep going. So we're going to have you back on the Fix for a part 2 for sure. Hopefully when that second book comes out, if not sooner. But I'm so grateful for you. So appreciative of everything you shared, especially those tidbits that you put out into the world for the very first time. I want to acknowledge you for trusting me to guide us through this conversation. I appreciate you taking the time to set up the meditation for us and coordinating that right at the last second. It was such a great idea, and I really feel like it helped me show up in a different way for this. So thank you for all of that. And to everybody who listened today, go ahead and check out Erin's book. And if you got anything from this episode, one detail, I hope you got 1,000 things from it. But if you even just got one thing, you know what to do. Go ahead, share it. Always appreciative of somebody leaving a review. Let us know what you liked, what you thought about it. And we look forward to catching you for another episode. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you.